It's June the 9th, 2021, and our reading today in 1 Samuel is chapter 25. Now Samuel died, and all Israel assembled and mourned for him, and they buried him at his home in Ramah. Then David moved down into the desert of Maon. A certain man in Maon who had property there at Carmel was very wealthy. He had 1,000 goats and 3,000 sheep, which he was shearing in Carmel. His name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. She was an intelligent and beautiful woman, but her husband, a Calebite, was surly and mean in his dealings. While David was in the desert, he heard that Nabal was shearing sheep, so he sent 10 young men and said to them, "Go up to Nabal at Carmel and greet him in my name. Say to him, 'Long life to you, good health to you and your household, and good health to all that is yours. Now I hear that it is sheep shearing time. When your shepherds were with us, we did not ill treat them, and the whole time they were at Carmel, nothing of theirs was missing. Ask your own servants, and they will tell you. Therefore be favorable towards my young men, since we come at a festive time. Please give your servants and your son David whatever you can find for them.' When David's men arrived, they gave Nabal this message in David's name. Then they waited. Nabal answered David's servants, 'Who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse? Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. Why should I take my bread and water and the meat I have slaughtered for my shearers and give it to men coming from who knows where?' David's men turned round and went back. When they arrived, they reported every word. David said to his men, 'Put on your swords.' So they put on their swords, and David put on his. About 400 men went up with David, while 200 stayed with the supplies. One of the servants told Nabal's wife Abigail, 'David sent messengers from the desert to give our master his greetings, but he hurled insults at them. Yet these men were very good to us. They did not ill-treat us, and the whole time we were out in the fields near them, nothing was missing. Night and day they were a wall around us all the time. We were herding our sheep near them. Now think it over and see what you can do, because disaster is hanging over our master and his whole household. He is such a wicked man that no one can talk to him.' Abigail lost no time. She took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 seahs of roasted grain, 100 cakes of raisins, and 200 cakes of pressed figs, and loaded them on donkeys. Then she told her servants, 'Go on ahead, I'll follow you.' But she did not tell her husband, Nabal. As she came riding her donkey into a mountain ravine, there were David and his men descending towards her, and she met them. David had just said, 'It's been useless, all my watching over this fellow's property in the desert, so that nothing of his was missing. He's paid me back evil for good. May God deal with David, be it ever so severely, if by morning I leave alive one male of all who belong to him.' When Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey and bowed down before David with her face to the ground. She fell at his feet and said, 'My lord, let the blame be on me alone. Please let your servant speak to you. Hear what your servant has to say. May my lord pay no attention to that wicked man Nabal. He's just like his name. His name is Fool, and folly goes with him. But as for me, your servant, I did not see the men my master sent. Now, since the Lord has kept you, my master, from bloodshed and from avenging yourself with your own hands, as surely as the Lord lives and as you live, may your enemies and all who intend to harm my master be like Nabal. And let this gift which your servant has brought to my master be given to the men who follow you. Please forgive your servant's offense. For the Lord will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my master, because he fights the Lord's battles. Let no wrongdoing be found in you as long as you live. Even though someone is pursuing you to take your life, the life of my master will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies he will hurl away as from the pocket of a sling. When the Lord has done for my master every good thing he promised concerning him, and has appointed him leader over Israel, My master will not have on his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed or of having avenged himself. And when the Lord has brought my master success, remember your servant. David said to Abigail, Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me. May you be blessed for your good judgment and for keeping me from bloodshed this day and from avenging myself with my own hands. Otherwise, as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, who has kept me from harming you, if you had not come quickly to meet me, not one male belonging to Nabal would have been left alive by daybreak. Then David accepted from her hand what she had brought to him and said, Go home in peace. I've heard your words and granted your request. When Abigail went to Nabal, he was in the house holding a banquet like that of a king. He was in high spirits and very drunk, so she told him nothing until daybreak. Then in the morning, when Nabal was sober, his wife told him all these things, and his heart failed him, and he became like a stone. About 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, Praise be to the Lord, who has upheld my cause against Nabal for treating me with contempt. He has kept his servant from doing wrong and has brought Nabal's wrongdoing down on his own head. Then David sent word to Abigail, asking her to become his wife. His servants came to Carmel and said to Abigail, David has sent us to you to take you to become his wife. She bowed down with her face to the ground and said, Here is your maidservant, ready to serve you and wash the feet of my master's servants. Abigail quickly got on a donkey and, attended by her 5 maids, went with David's messengers and became his wife. David had also married Ahinoam of Jezreel, and they both were his wives. But Saul had given his daughter Michal, David's wife, to Paltiel, son of Laish, who was from Galim. Amen. Now we begin this chapter with a sad note, a note of sadness concerning the death of Samuel, that great man, the last of the judges, the first of the prophets, in verse 1. But in the rest of the chapter, we have this interplay between folly and wisdom. First of all, we see the folly, verses 2 to 13, embodied in this man, Nabal. Now, he's a very wealthy man, we're told that, but wealth doesn't give you brains. Even having an outstanding, beautiful, intelligent wife like Abigail, verse 3, doesn't do you any good if you are a mean, ugly, spiteful, stupid kind of person who won't listen and won't learn. When David sends his servants to him and reminds him of the kindness that has been shown to his men out in the fields in the past by David and his men, that's in verses 7 to 11, what does Nabal do? He mocks him, verses 10 and 11, and insults him. That's in verse 12. So verses 12 to 13, the folly of this man Nabal. We could also add to that, in fact, at this point, the folly of David, because while we'll see a great change taking place in him, and we know with David he has his ups and downs, what's his response to being treated like this by Nabal? Actually, buckle up, get your swords on, we're going to go there and wipe him out. There's an impetuosity about David and a bloodthirstiness. We'll see this popping up again and again, and it's something that even God will hold against him later on. So that's a little bit of the folly that's even in David's heart. But if we see that in the 2 men who dominate this chapter, we see great good sense in this lovely character, Abigail, verses 14 to 35. She gets to hear of David's vow or his intention and what he's going to do. This will bring absolute disaster upon her husband, probably herself as well, probably the whole of the community that they are part of and that they lead will be wiped out. So what does she do? Very quickly, she shows great decisiveness and great good judgment. She gets on a donkey. She gets together very generous provisions for David and his men. And she sets off and she intercepts him as he's on the way with his men to bring about this disastrous destruction of her family and community. So she showers generous provisions upon him. Verse 18, she shows deep humility towards him, how she falls on her face, she's on the ground, and she takes the blame or asks for the blame for what's been said and done to come upon her. She asks for forgiveness, verse 28, please forgive your servant's offense. And then those wonderful, wise words that she shares with David, which are almost prophetic. They're certainly deeply spiritual words. The conclusion there. Please don't do this, David. Please don't just get carried away with your emotions and your feeling. And then, if you don't do this, look what she says, verse 31. You will not have on your conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed, or having avenged yourself. And when the Lord has brought my master success, remember your servant, remember me, she's really saying. David recognizes this is a woman of extraordinary and good judgment. Verse 33, he uses that lovely expression there, of her. And by heeding her counsel, this is where he is so different from the pagan, wicked man, Nabal. By listening, by changing his ways, by not doing what his blood and passion was leading him to do, then David actually, he shows a lot of good sense as well. So there's folly. Where does that lead? There's good sense. Where does that lead? Well, that brings us to the consequences of where these two lines of action will lead, verses 33 to 44. Nabal, not surprisingly, comes under divine judgment, verse 38. And David and Abigail are both rewarded for their good sense. And what is the reward that they get? Well, mostly in this chapter, they get each other. Verse 40, his servants went to Carmel and said to Abigail, David has sent us to you to take you to become his wife. And that's exactly what happens. The Bible is many things. It certainly is a word of wisdom, and it calls us to live such a life and to be people of good sense, good judgment, wise people. Ephesians 5:15 to 17. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is.